Let's begin. We are on page Lamid Amud Aleph. If you're following the art scroll, 30A3. Okay, so let's go back. Remember, the Mishnah is discussing 4 different weeks. And as we've explained, the first, the second, the third, the fourth doesn't necessarily mean the first, second, third, fourth weeks in a row. It's not saying week 1, week 2. It's saying that there are 4 weeks that have special readings. The first of the 4 weeks was Shekalim. The second of the 4 weeks was Bashiniya. Let's read the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, in the second week, what do you have? Zachor. Okay? So, Bashiniya Zachor. Now the Gemara is going to discuss what that refers to. Bashiniya Zachor. On the second of the 4 weeks, we read Parshat Zachor. What is Parshat Zachor? Where we read about the story of the destruction of, the commandment of the destruction Amalek, and to remember what they did to you when they left the land of Egypt. Itmar, Purim shechal liot be'erev Shabbat. So when are you normally reading Zachor? In the second of the 4 weeks, okay? What if Purim falls on Erev Shabbat, on the Friday? Okay, Rav says, Magdimin Parshat Zachor. We move Parshat Zachor before the story of Purim. Shmuel Amar, and Shmuel says, no, Me'acharin. We put it after the story of Purim. What would be the reasoning for each side? Rav Amar Magdimin. Rav says we make it earlier. Kihechi delo tigdom asiyah leschira. In order that the deed does not precede the creed. See what I did there? That was a lot of rhyming. The story of Purim is the Asiyah, okay? The commandment in the Pasuk is the Zechira. So first you have the Zechira, remember to destroy Amalek. Then you have Purim, which is the destruction of Amalek. So Rav says we go first. Why? In order we should not have the Asiyah precede the commandment. Okay? The Gemara continues, and what is Shmuel's opinion? Shmuel says, no, after. Kivan ika mukafin de'avdi b'chamesar, since you have the walled cities that are doing it on the 15th, which means that that's going to be after, because if Purim is on Friday, the 15th would be on Shabbat, it would get pushed to Sunday. So therefore, Asiyah uzechira behadeh hadadika atyan. So you have a Zechira and Asiyah, even though you're not going to read the Megillah on that day, but the fact that it happened on the 15th day of the month in the walled cities, so you'll have the Zechira and the Asiyah fall out on the same day. What could be better than that?
So they're saying that the reading of Parashat Zachor is basically covering for not reading the Megillah on that day?
No, it's saying
not to equate the two. I'm saying, but you're getting some part of Zachor.
Not for the sake of Megillah. No, not for the sake of absolving Megillah. We're speaking more to the symmetry of the Asiyah and the Zechira. So Purim represents the fulfillment of the wiping out of Amalek in destroying Haman and his 10 sons. That's when it was done. Okay, and when it comes to the reading of Zachor, that's only the commandment to do so. So Rav says have it earlier, so that way it precedes the Zechira precedes the Asiyah. Shmuel says even if you did the Asiyah on the 14th, there's still another Asiyah on the 15th, which means that then you'll have a simultaneous Zechira and Asiyah, which is the most synonymous, which would be the most appropriate. Okay. So, Tanan. So let's see. How do we figure this out? What do we hold like? Bashiniya Zachor. The Mishnah says on the second Shabbat we read Zachor. V'haki mikla resh yarcha b'Shabbat. When Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbat, that's when we said earlier. Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbat. What do we do with Parshat Shekalim? We go earlier, right? Remember that? Because we want to make sure that we announce the Shekalim before Rosh Chodesh comes in, where they'll start collecting it, okay? Because that's when it starts being chayav to bring. So, Mikla Purim, Be'erev Shabbat. So if Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbat, when does Purim turn out? Right? 2 weeks later, on the day, on Erev Shabbat, okay? Because it starts in the evening. Vikatani b'shiniya zachor. But the Mishnah says on the second day, on the second Shabbat, The Gemara over here is understanding Shiniya over here, like we said in the beginning of the Gemara earlier, means the second week. So then Shiniya Zachor would mean on that second week. What would that tell you?
Before, it's 8th day.
If it would mean, no, it would mean that we're not Makdimin.
The second week is the start of the second week, isn't it?
No, because you're reading it on Shabbat Zachor. So the Gemara says, the Mishnah discussed the case of Rosh Chodesh that falls out on Shabbat. So if Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbat, when does Purim fall out on? Friday night.
Right.
What does that mean? You're going to be reading the Megillah, which is Asiyah, before you do the Zechirah. Right? So what would Rav hold? So what would Rav hold in that case? What would you do with Shabbat Zachor? You would have to go 1 week back, which would mean Shekalim would be pushed a week before Rosh Chodesh. The week of Rosh Chodesh would be nothing. The Shabbat after Rosh Chodesh would be Zachor. The Friday after that would be Megillah. But the Gemara is proving from the fact that it tells you Bashiniyah, that tells you that we're holding like Shmuel, that you don't make it earlier when it falls out on Friday. On that the Gemara answers the answer that we already had in the first iteration of this. Amar Rav Papa, what does it mean when it says my Shiniyah? It doesn't mean the second week. It means Shniyah lahafsaka. It means the second week from the interruption of Rosh Chodesh. From the break that you had between Shekalim and Zachor. Says the Gemara, so therefore it doesn't prove one way or the other, because I could tell you that the Mishnah means Shiniyah lahafsaka. Okay? Says the Gemara, Tashma. Okay, so then what are we going to do? Let's try and find another proof how we hold vis-a-vis Rav and Shmuel. Ezu Shabbat Shniyah. The Braita says, what does it mean? What's this second week that we're talking about? Kol shechal Purim liot betocha. Anytime you have Purim fall out on one day of the week, within the week, what do we do with Zachor? If I feel b'erev Shabbat, even if it falls out on erev Shabbat, what do we do? So you see that you see that we're still calling that Shabbat Shiniyah. My love, be'erev Shabbat dumya d'tocha. Do we not mean to say that erev Shabbat, ve'afilu be'erev Shabbat, means that you are comparing erev Shabbat to during the week, illustrating that we would hold Matocha Magdimin, just like when Purim is in the middle of the week, we would read it earlier. Af Erev Shabbat Magdimin, so to Erev Shabbat. Exactly the same Gemara that we had before. What does Shemuel say? Shemuel says, no, I'll read the Braita. Betocha doesn't mean in middle of the week, it means ba, on the Shabbat. So when it falls out on Shabbat, and also on Erev Shabbat, so that would be the Shmuel, and that actually also is how they had the Braita in the Yeshiva of Shmuel. So it fits with his understanding that if it falls out on Friday, you would not bring it back the week before. You would read Shabbat Zachor on the day after the reading of the Megillah. Okay. What happens when Purim falls out on Shabbat itself? Okay, so what do? Amar Rav Huna, l'divrei hakol en makdimin. We don't go backwards. Not just Shmuel says that, but Rav also holds you do not go backwards. Rav Nachman Amar, Rav Nachman says, adayini machloket. No, still in that case, they argue Rav and Shmuel. So we have two opinions. One opinion is, Rav would agree if Purim falls out on the same day. Now, let's just take one step back. Remember Shmuel said that if it falls out on the 14th, so the cities that are walled, read it on the 15th. And then you have Asiyah and Zechira on the same day. Okay? Rav, we would have assumed that Rav also agrees with that. It's just that Rav doesn't like it because the 14-day people don't have it fall out the same day. They have Asiyah preceding Zechira. So the first opinion of the Gemara understood Rav like that. That the only reason why I argued with Shemuel was when the 14th fell out before the reading of Parashat Zachor. However, if it would fall out on Shabbat, that the 15th, the 14th, and the reading of the Megillah, and the reading of the Amalek is on the same exact day, no problem.
You're pushing it anyway because on the 14th.
Sorry?
You're pushing it anyway because the 14th.
Anyway, you're not reading Megillah. But it means that the day of Purim is falling. The day of Asiyah, the day that they were killed, is on the day of the Zechira. Okay? Rav Nachman says, no, adayini machloket. Even in the case where Purim falls out on Shabbat, still Rav holds that you would go back a full week because it's even if it falls out on the same day, he still has a problem. Now, let me explain what the problem with Rav Nachman is. What did Rav say initially? You can't have reading Zachor after the Megillah. Why? Because then you have Asiyah Kodem Zechira. What is it mashma from Rav's expression? That Asiyah cannot be before Zechira. Which would lead you to believe that the Gemara's understanding of Rav, right, in Rav Huna is definitely correct. Because when it falls out on the same time, if Rav meant that they can't be on the same time, Rav didn't need to tell you can't have this before this. He should have said, you can't have this until you have this. Indicating that it needs to be after. From the fact that Rav says you can't have Asiyah before Zechira, it sounds like if it will be on the same day, no problem. Is that clear? Why does he argue on 14 and 15 if it's on the same day? The answer is because it's not on the same day for the 14-day people. So Rav is saying, I'm not okay with anyone having Asiyah before Zechira. But in a scenario where everyone has, even the 14-day people, have Asiyah and Zechira matched up, which means it's not before, how could you possibly fit that into Rav's language from before? Okay? So it would seem like Rav Huna has a better bead on Rav's opinion than Rav Nachman. Okay. Itmanami, however, why did Rav Nachman say this? If it would seem to prove, like he says, because we also learn from in the name of Rav, Am Rav Chia bar Abba, Am Rabbi Abba Amar Rav. Rav Chia bar Abba said in the name of Rabbi Abba, said in the name of Rav, Purim shechal liot b'Shabbat, Magdim v'koreh b'Shabbat shavra zachor. We have an explicit statement of Rav saying that that's what he means. So therefore, when you have Rav telling you what he means, then you have another Rav that you're making a diuk in what he means, what wins out?
Rav,
what he actually says. Yep, okay. Says the Mishnah. So therefore, Rav Nachman is going to carry the day, and there will be a machloket Rav and Shmuel, even when Purim falls out on Shabbat, when you read Parshat Zachor. Shmuel holds on the day, Rav holds, you go earlier, just like you would go earlier if it was Friday, just like you would go earlier if it was during the week. The Mishnah continues, Bashilishit, on the third of the 4 weeks, Paraduma, read the Paraduma, Tanu Rabbanan, Ezri Shabbat Shilishit. What does that mean, the third week? When do we read the third week of the 4 portions? Kol shesimucha lepurim me'achareha. Any week that you have that is close to Purim, but specifically after it. Okay? That's when you would read Shabbat Para. Itmar, the Gemara says, 1 second. When we were learning this, Rav Chama bar Chanina Amar, Shabbat hasmucha l'Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the Shabbat that's close to Rosh Chodesh Nisan, okay? But before it, okay? So long as it's before it, that's the one that you read it. The problem is that those 2 Shabbats are not always the same Shabbat. Okay? The Gemara says, Velo pligi, there's no machloket, the Braita and Rabbi Chama. Ha'deikla Rosh Chodesh Nisan b'Shabbat. One case is when Rosh Chodesh Nisan falls out on Shabbat, then what happens? Right? Ha'deikla be'emtza Shabbat. And one is talking about, right, when Rosh Chodesh Nisan falls in the middle of the week. So, when Rosh Chodesh Nisan falls out on Shabbat, then that Shabbat could be the Shabbat that comes out after Megilla. If Rosh Chodesh Nisan falls out of Shabbat, remember, what day of the month is Purim? 14 or 15, okay? So it's exactly the halfway mark. So you'd imagine between then and Rosh Chodesh Nisan is 1 Shabbat, 2 Shabbats, depending. Because it would have to be exact depending on whether it's a leap year or not, okay? So if Shabbat Nisan is on a Shabbat, which gives you the maximal amount of days, so then the Shabbat before Nisan is the Shabbat you're going to read it on, okay? If Shabbat Nisan falls out not on Shabbat, okay, Hadikla, Rav Chama says it's the week before when it falls on Shabbat, because then it gives you the maximal, which means that's the week after Purim. But when the Braita was talking about, it was talking about Ikla be'emtza Shabbat, when Nisan falls out on Emtza Shabbat. What does that turn out to be? It turns out that it's the week after Purim, but not the week before Chodesh Nisan. So they're both discussing the Shabbat after. One is discussing the Shabbat after Purim. One is discussing the Shabbat after Nisan. That seems to be a contradiction. The answer is no. One's talking about when there's the full 2 weeks to Nisan, that's Rav Chama. And when there isn't the full 2 weeks, that's according to the opinion of the Braita, and therefore there's no contradiction. Velo peligi, there's no machloket. Okay, says the Gemara b'revi'it on the fourth. What do we read on the fourth? This month shall be for you. In fact, that's actually this week's parasha. Right? Cool. The end of Parashat Bo is Hachodesh Hazeh Lachem. This month is for you, Rashi Chodashim. Okay, so let's try and understand the readings of the 4 weeks in the Braita. Tana Rabbanan, Rosh Chodesh Adar shechal liot b'Shabbat. We've seen this Braita already in different pieces throughout the whole learning up until now. Rosh Chodesh Adar shechal liot b'Shabbat. If Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out on Shabbat, Korin Kitisa, when to read Shekalim, we said, right? Umaftirin b'Yehoyada. And you do a haftarah in Yehoyada. Remember, Yehoyada was talking about collecting money for the korbanot, which makes sense because it matches the reading of Shekalim. So if Rosh Chodesh Adar falls on Shabbat, first you read Kitisa umaftirin beYehoyada. Ve'ezuhi Shabbat Rishona. So what's the first week? Kol shechal Rosh Chodesh Adar liot betocha. If Shabbat falls out, if Rosh Chodesh falls out during the week, on one of the days of the week, Afilu be'erev Shabbat, including on Friday. So then what do? We read it the week before. We read it the Shabbat before. Okay? Says the Gemara, Bashnya, Bazachor. The second one is on Zachor. And what do we read for the Haftarah when we do Shabbat Zachor? Maftirim Pakadati. We read the story of Pakadati. What's the story of Pakadati? That's the Milchama of King Shaul against the Amalekite king, Agagi, who, in not killing Agag, he brings him back alive. Shmuel kills him the next day. But in the interim, Agag got busy that night. Okay? And what happened? The pregnancy that came from his intimacy that evening resulted in who being born? Haman, Agagi. So, we read on the story, and when we read Zachor destroying Amalek, we also read Pakati, the story of Shaul. What's the second Shabbat that we read? Kol shechal Purim liot betocha. Anytime Purim falls out during the week, Vafil be'erev Shabbat, or even on Friday, okay, on the eve of Friday, still. Even on Friday, which would mean Thursday night, Friday. So we would still read the week before that portion. Bashilishit para, in the third week, para aduma, umaftirin. So what's the haftarah of Parshat para aduma, which is all about tahara and about purifying someone from tameh met, when they interacted with a dead body. They have the highest form of tum'ah that a person could find, which is called avi avot tum'ah, the grandfather of tum'ah. If you ever wanted to know where the concept of grandfathered in is, that is this language, avi avot tum'ah. So still we find that the haftarah will match it, because it says v'zarakti alechem ma'im teorim, I will throw purifying waters on you in the time of Mashiach, and that will purify Am Yisrael from Tameh Met. Right now, today, there's no one that is not Tameh Met. Okay? Ezuhi Shabbat Shalishit. What is this third Shabbat that you're going to read it on? The third Shabbat, the third of the 4 readings. Anytime you have a Shabbat right after Purim, but it's not on it itself, that's when you would read the third parasha, which is the parasha of Parashat Para. And when do you read the fourth one? HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem. Maftirin, what do you read for Haftarah? Ko Amar Hashem, which is where HaKadosh Baruch Hu talks about the korbanot of the Korban Pesach, right? Turn to, you see number 40 there, the pasuk, where is it?
It's on here in the middle of the page.
כה אמר השם אלוקים בראשון באחד לחודש תיקח פר בן בקר תמים v'chiteta et hamikdash, and you will purify the Bet HaMikdash. So we're going to bring again all of the korbanot to Bet HaMikdash. So we read, Achodesh hazeh lachem, that is the haftarah for that pasuk. Ezuhi shana Shabbat Revi'it, and what is this fourth week of the four portions? Rosh Chodesh Nisan liot betocha. If Rosh Chodesh falls in the middle of the week, va'afilu erev Shabbat, you would go before it, like we said earlier. But if Rosh Chodesh Nisan falls out on Shabbat, like we said already, so then it would wind up being the week after and not that final week. Okay, let's continue the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, B'chamishit, what do we do on the fifth Shabbat after all of the four portions are read? B'chamishit chozrin l'chisidran. We go back to reading the regular parasha of the week. Now, the question is, if we say chozrin l'sidran, the implication is l'seder mai. What do you mean that we went back to something? What did we stop from and what are we going back to? L'seder mai. Rabbi Ami says, l'seder parashiot hu chozer. You go back to the regular reading of parashiot. Rabbi Yirmiyah Omer, l'seder haftarot hu chozer. We go back to the regular reading of haftarot. Okay, so we have two different opinions as to what it is that we're resuming in that fifth week between Rav Yirmiyah and Rav Ami. Okay, so let's see. Who do we hold like? Amar Abaya. Abaya says, tell him we just need to put on mute. Says Gemara, Amar Abaye. Abaye is going to prove now who we hold like. It makes sense to learn like the opinion of Rav Ami. What did Rav Ami say? The seder parashiot hu chozer, that we return to the seder of parashiot. Okay, let's just take a look for 1 second at Rashi, right smack in the middle of the big Rashis. Okay, of the big paragraph of Rashis. You see that? You with me? On Lamed Amud Bet, the seder parashiot, the one line above that. Okay, l'seder parashiot shebishabatot halalu hifsiku seder parashiot. In these parashiot, we stopped reading the regular parashiot. Delo karu ela arba parashiot halalu.
We read those four.
He says that when we see in the Mishnah that you go back to your order, Rabbi Ami understood that to mean that we were not doing the order during these 4 weeks. So according to Rabbi Ami, unlike all that we've been learning up until this point, he held that on the week of Parashat Para, what'd you read? Parashat Para. That's it. What'd you read Zachor? Only Zachor.
It's only a couple.
Don't matter. Well, good question. But that's all you read on that week. Okay? All the regular parashiot were on hold for the duration of the 4 parashiot. Rabbi Yirmiyahu says, no, you just read the haftarah differently. Says Rashi, they said after Chozer, שעד הנה מפטירין מאין 4 פרשות הללו, השניות הללו בברייתא. So Rabbi Yirmiyah actually holds like what we've said up until this point. Remember we had before where you read the first parasha, and then the last thing you read, the 7th ole, is when you read the 4 parashiot. So Rabbi Yirmiyah is going according to everything that we learned up until now. But Rabbi Ami was making a derasha on diuk in the Mishnah. So ask the Gemara, how do we hold? Amar Abaye, Kavated Rabbi Ami mistabra. It seems like Rabbi Ami, the Tanan, because we learned in the Mishnah, lakol mafsikin. For everything, we are mafsikin. We interrupt. L'Rashi Chodashim, leChanukah, lePurim, leTaniyot, uleMa'amadot, uleYom HaKippurim. So all of these things, if you remember, we said mafsikin. When you have a new reading, what do you do with the old reading? You don't read it. So in other words, what do you do on a regular Monday, Thursday, when it's Rosh Chodesh, when it's Chol HaMoed? Do you read Parashat Noach and the holiday? No. You just read the reading of that day on a fast day. So if the Mishnah says mafsikin, and that's what it means on those other cases, maybe that's what it means over here too, that on the Shabbat, now you have to read para, so you should say para. If you hold according to the opinion that says that you pause the parasha reading Hainu di'ika parasha b'chol. That's why there's a parasha during the weekday. According to the opinion that says, you're going back to haftarot, haftara b'chol mi'ika. So when the Mishnah continues and says that we're going to pause the readings, for these special readings. The opinion that says that you take a break from the regular reading of the Torah and you do this instead, that makes sense during the week, because on Monday and Thursday, what would you have read? Noach, Lech Lecha, whatever, okay? You would pause that and read the other thing. But according to the opinion that the whole time, the only thing we've been talking about is reading a different haftarah or maftir, there is no haftir or haftarah during the week. So therefore, it would seem from the Mishnah to be a proof to the words of Rabbi Ami. The Gemara says, V'idach. What do you mean? But according to the other opinion, right? What would he say? Rabbi Yirmiyah, Ha kid'ita, v'ha kid'ita. When you talked about the order and you were talking about Shabbat, what is it talking about? Haftarah. When you're talking about Monday and Thursday, where there's no haftarah, what does mafsikin mean when you're not talking about a time which has haftarah? There it's talking about the Torah, okay? So therefore, he would hakidita. He's saying it has a dynamic interpretation, and therefore it changes as it would be read. Gemara says, let's see if we come up with another proof. Ubitaniot lama li hafsaka. On a fast day, right, where you're going to be reading. You're going to read Vayichal Moshe, right? Lama li hafsaka. Why do you have to do it? Likri mitzafra b'inyana deyoma. Read in the morning reading of the Torah. We should read the inyanim of the day. U'mincha tanita. So you're going to read Noach in the morning, and you're going to read for mincha, because you take out Sefer Torah on a fast day at mincha, and in mincha time you read the Ta'anit. You read Vayichal Moshe. Misayeh Rav Huna. This, what's it called? This seems to indicate that we're going according to Rav Huna. The Amar Rav Huna, right? Mitzafra kinufia, from the morning, we're already in the engagement, in the process of fasting. So since already from mitzafra, from the morning kinufia, we're fasting, so we're going to read the fasting from the morning. Okay? That would seem to prove, like the opinion of Rabbi Yirmiyah, of Rav Huna, excuse me. So what do we do on a fast day? Amar Abaya says, mitzafra, from the morning, lepalga diyoma, until midday, ma'ayinin b'mili demata. So what do? You have a fast day. You're not supposed to be working on a fast day, ideally. So what do? You deal with the issues that the city has. So everyone comes together, the important people of the town, and they deal with the issues of the town. Mipalga diyoma lefanya riva, from chatzot, midday, until the lepanya riva diyoma, the quarter of the day. In other words, from half till a quarter, right? There's obviously 4 quarters. So you have the first 2 quarters is the half. Now we split the remainder of the day into 2 pieces. From chatzot until the last quarter of the day, until the 4th quarter. Okay, what do? Karina, kari mifteri. We read the haftarah, we read the issues that are relating to the fast day. V'riv'ah diyoma ba'urachami. And on the final remaining quarter of the day, what do? We pray for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to have mercy on Am Yisrael, which is the reason why we have the fast day in the first place. Shneimar v'yikru b'sefer Torat Hashem Eloheim. They read in the sefer, in the book of Hashem, their God, Revi'it Hayom, a quarter of the day. Revi'it Hayom, and a quarter of the day, mitvadim u'mishtachavim. They would do a vidui, right? Mitvadeh is from Lashon vidui. They would do the vidui, the bow, beating on the chest, u'mishtachavim, and they bow to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So you see that half of the day is divided between the Torah of the fast day, the learning of the fast day, and the prayers and the supplications for the fast day. Ve'epachana, says the Gemara, who told you that that's what that that's what we mean. That the first half of the day is dealt with in that way. Me'aynin b'mili demata, and then the second half of the day is the day that's split. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe you spend the first part of the day dealing with those things, the learning of the fast day and the prayers. Lo sal kedaitach. Don't think that that's possible. Dichtiv, because it says in the pasuk, ve'elai ya'asefu kol chared b'divrei Eloi Yisrael, and to me will gather all the people that were trembling in the words of the God of Israel, al ma'al hagolah, for the ma'al zashon me'ila, from the rebellion of the exiles. V'ani yoshev mishomem ad leminhat ha'arev, and I sit there. Mishomem is like a person who's blown away. He's just completely taken over until the evening. So you see clearly that the first part of the day happens first, and that the approaching of God happens second. Uchtiv, not only that, minchat erev kamti mita'aniti, and from the mincha of the evening, I got up from my ta'anit, illustrating that the mincha happens at the last portion of the day of the ta'anit. Okay, let's continue the Mishnah. Let's see if we can finish the Mishnah. Okay, is everyone good for time or no?
Yeah. 10, 15 more minutes.
Okay, perfect. Says the Mishnah, the Pesach. So now, what do? We went from Megillah, then we moved from Megillah to the 4 parashiyot that we read: Shekalim, Zachor, Parshat Para, and Parshat HaChodesh. Now, what are we up to? We're up to the readings that are relevant and associated with Pesach. Okay. Now, Pesach Kurim Parshat Moadot Shel Torat Kohanim. On Pesach, so what are we reading? We're reading the Parshat Moadot, which is at the end of Parshat Pinchas. So we read the story, the elements which are connected, in Emor. We read the stories of the Korbanot, not the stories, the Psukim of the Korbanot that we find in Sefer Vayikra. Ba'atzeret, and what do we read on Shavuot? On Shavuot we read the portion of Shiv'ah Shavuot, the counting of the 7 weeks. B'Rosh Hashanah, what do we read? B'chodesh HaShivi'i Be'echad LaChodesh, on the 7th month, on the first day of the month. Just remember, in the Torah, the first month is not Tishrei, the first month is Nisan. B'chodesh HaRishon is the month of Nisan. The month of Tishrei, which is Rosh Hashanah, in the language of the Torah is called the 7th month. So Rosh Hashanah, what are we reading? In the 7th month, on the first day. Yom Kippurim, Acharemot, on Yom Kippurim we read the pasuk of Acharemot Shnei Bnei Aharon. Why are we reading the pasukim of Shnei Bnei Aharon? We'll see. In fact, we have a special song that we sing, and we'll come back to that, right? Beautiful, very moving song about the death of the 2 sons of Aharon. And that's what we read on Yom Kippur. We have to figure out why we read that on Yom Kippur, and the reason why that's not. What do you mean? You just read that. Why? What's the question? The question is, on Rosh Hashanah, you read the portion that talks about the holiday Rosh Hashanah. You automatically assume that what would you read on Yom Kippur? On the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, which is the story of Yom Kippur. It's the Pesukim of describing the holiday. And yet, what do we do instead? We read Acharei Mot Shnei Bnei Aharon. That does not happen on Yom Kippur. When does that happen? When did the 2 sons of Aharon die? Anyone know when? On Rosh Chodesh Nisan. How do I know that? Because when did they die? Bayom?
On the inauguration day of the temple.
Excellent, inauguration day of the Mishkan. Rashi tells us on the spot, quoting the Midrash, that day is the day of 10 crowns. And one of the crowns is that it's Rosh Chodesh of Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So the day that they die is not Yom Kippur. So why are we reading it? So we'll see in just a bit. Okay? B'Yom Tov HaRishon Shel Chag, on the first day of Sukkot, Korin beParashat Moadot shebeTorat Kohanim. We read from the Parashat Moadot of Torat Kohanim, which is the same as we said that we read on Pesach, where it tells us about the korbanot that are brought in the Beit HaMikdash. Ubishar Kol Yimot. So what do we do on the other days of Sukkot? Shayimot Achag, beKorbanot Achag. You read in the korbanot of that day. If you remember, what do we read then? Korbanot. right? Because it goes, the Bulls, the way it works is, not the Chicago Bulls, something else. There's a descending order of how many bulls they brought on each day, leading up from 13 to 4 to 12 to 11 to 10, until you make your way down. They sacrifice 70 bulls over the period of Sukkot to represent the 70 nations that Am Yisrael is trying on Sukkot to be able to bring sustenance to. Look at what we do in our temple. We're bringing korbanot for them to be able to bring them beracha. Says the Gemara, if they would have known that we bring korbanot for their success and the beracha that it gives them, they would have surrounded the Beit HaMikdash with non-Jewish soldiers, ya'ani NATO forces, and they would not have allowed anyone to destroy it ever. Okay? So,
Why is Sukkot called Chag?
Because in the Torah, it refers to Sukkot again and again and again and again as a Chag. Hagotem oto Hag LaHashem, etc., etc. It's also the holiday which is has the largest hayuv of Simcha. Even though there's a Simcha for all of them, same thing. Even though there's a Chag for all of them, the one that has the greatest element of Chag and Simcha is Sukkot. Okay, that's why it's called Hag Simchatenu. Okay, Zman Simchatenu. B'Chanukah. So what do we read on Chanukah? We read the gift of the Nisi'im. When was the gift of the Nisi'im? The gift of the Nisi'im was when they missed the inauguration of the donations to the Beit HaMikdash. So they decided they were going to bring korbanot for the inauguration of the Mizbeach. Right? Remember the Ze Korban She'elu Mi'el. Right? Each one brings the korban. Parshat Naso, identical korban for each one, and we read it 12 individual times. Each one gets their own bit again and again and again and again. So on Chanukah, we read the Nisi'im, and we read on day 1, day 2, 2, 3, 4, blah, blah, blah. On the final day, on the 8th day, we read all the way till the end. The Chanukah, Nisi'im. On Chanukah, we read about the Nisi'im and the donations to the Chanukah to Mizbeach. B'Purim, what do we read on Purim? Vayavo Amalek Yemach Shemo. And Amalek came. Rosh Chodeshim, what do we read on Rosh Chodesh? Rosh Chodeshim, you read on Rosh Chodesh the pasuk that talks about the korbanot that you bring on Rosh Chodesh. B'Ma'amadot, what do we read on the Ma'amadot? B'Maaseh Bereshit. We read about the Maaseh Bereshit, the creation of the world. If you remember, when we were discussing how many Pesukim does a person read for each Aliyah, we discussed in the Ma'amadot how you break up Sefer Bereshit. Remember from the beginning? 5 Pesukim, 6 Pesukim, 3 Pesukim, etc., etc. So what are the Ma'amadot? Just to remind us, the Ma'amadot are that in every Korban that you bring, you must have the person who the Korban is being brought for, they need to be present with the Korban. Okay? So when you have a Korban that's being brought for all of Am Yisrael, the communal sacrifices, who needs to be there if it's on behalf of everybody? Everybody. So what do we do for that? We have the Kohen, the Levi, and the Israel tribe, right? Each division has a member that is there, present and counted for, so that there's representation for each of the segments of Am Yisrael present when they bring the Korban. The Kohanim have a shift of people that are there in the Beit HaMikdash serving. The Leviim have a shift of people that are in the Beit HaMikdash singing. Israel would have people go to Yerushalayim to stand there by the Korban. What happens if you didn't live in Yerushalayim? Says the Mishnah in Ta'anit, that the Ma'amadot, the Israelim that lived in Deal, New Jersey, there was a segment of people that were given a certain time. They would be fasting, praying on that time in the Beit Knesset, and they would have a special bit to read, and they would read every day from Sefer Bereshit, just for the Ma'amadot. So b'Ma'amadot, b'Maaseh Bereshit. That's what we read. B'Ta'aniyot, what do we read on Ta'aniyot? Berachot u'Klalot. On the Ta'anit, you read the Berachot and Klalot on Har Gerizim and Har Eval. En mafsikin b'Kilalot, you do not, I think he's upstairs. En mafsikin b'Kilalot, we do not stop or pause in the middle of the Kilalot. Ela achad koreh et kulam. Rather, one person reads all of them. And we'll see why. It kind of sounds like if you had to get the Aliyah of Kilalot, you want to split it with someone else, right? Why does one guy have to take all of them? We'll discuss that in the Gemara. B'Sheni Chamishi, what do we read on Monday and Thursday during the week? B'Shabbat Mincha, and as well on Shabbat Mincha, Korin Kisidran, you read according to the Seder of the Parashiot. So in the week of Bereshit, as an example, that you're going to read Bereshit on Shabbat. So Monday, Thursday, you read Bereshit, and the Shabbat prior to Bereshit, you're also reading at Shabbat Mincha Bereshit. The next Monday after Bereshit, what are you reading? Noach. Sorry. And on Shabbat of Bereshit, what did you read? Noach. Then Monday and Thursday, Noach, and then Shabbat Noach. Monday, Lech Lecha, Lech Lecha, Lech Lecha, Lech Lecha, etc. Okay? So that's what you do. Korin Kitzidran, we read according to the order of the Torah. Ve'en olin lahem minha cheshbon. You do not count the readings of Monday, Thursday, Shabbat as part of the obligation of the cheshbon of how many you read on Shabbat. So in other words, you can't say I read on Monday Sheni, up till Sheni. On Thursday I'll read Sheni till Shilishi. Sorry, Shabbat I'll read from the beginning till Sheni. Monday I'll read Sheni till Shilishi. Thursday I'll read Shilishi till Revi. And then on Shabbat, all I'll need to read is Shishi Chamishi Shishi. Okay? It's the Koran program right there. All right? So what do we do with that? Since the Mishnah says, Lo en olin lahem minach cheshbon. Still, it doesn't count, and you need to read it again from the beginning. Let's see, where do we find this idea? Shneimah, as it says, Vayidaber Moshe et Moadei Amonai b'nei Yisrael, and Hashem spoke to Moshe et Moadei Amonai about the special days in the calendar year of Hashem, El Bnei Yisrael, to the Jewish people. Mitzvatan, sheyu korin kol echad ve'echad bizimano. The mitzvah is, what does it mean? Vayidaber Moshe et Moadei Amonai b'nei Yisrael, that Moshe read them to the Jewish people. That means that on every holiday, you read the commandments of God about that holiday to the people. And that's why the reading of the Torah on each holiday is germane, is specific to what the holiday actually is. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen ve'amen.